I stand at the window of the notary's office on Fifth Avenue, looking out at the gray New York sky. 2 weeks ago, I buried Dmitri. 2 weeks that feel like 2 years. I haven't slept, barely eaten, just sat in his study among the medical books and antique surgical instruments he collected. Dmitri died senselessly and horribly. Returning after a night surgery, he fell asleep at the wheel. The doctors said death was instantaneous. That doesn't make it easier for me. 12 years of marriage. 12 years next to a man who was everything to me. Husband, friend, anchor. We met at an antique auction. I restored antique furniture. He bought 19th century medical instruments. We were both obsessed with our work. We both didn't want children. Career seemed more important. Now I understand how much I've lost. Maria Anderson, the notary's secretary, pulled me from my thoughts. Please come in. I turned and headed toward the office. But at that moment, the entrance door burst open. A woman in her mid-30s entered, agitated with reddened eyes. Behind her shuffled a boy about 7 or 8 years old, thin, with large dark eyes. "Wait," she shouted. "I'm also here for the Belayev estate." I stopped. My heart plummeted. What estate? What woman? "Excuse me, but," I began. "You're his wife," she interrupted, coming closer. Her voice trembled, her hands shook. "I'm Svetlana, and this is Artem, the son of Dmitri Belayev, your husband, his father." Time seemed to stop. I looked at her, then at the boy. He really did have dark eyes like Dmitri's, but his facial features were different, completely different. "What are you saying?" I forced out. Svetlana rummaged in her bag, pulled out some papers, shoved them under my nose. "Here's the birth certificate. See? Father, Belayev Dmitri Igorovich. And there's a will. He promised to take care of us." I took the documents with trembling hands. The birth certificate was real. Artem Dmitrievich Belayev, 8 years old. Father, my husband. Birth date, I quickly calculated. 9 years ago. We'd been married 3 years by then. "Half his estate is mine," Svetlana continued, raising her voice. "Actually, my son's. By law, you have no children, and Artem has a right to the inheritance." The secretary frantically rushed to the notary's office. The boy pressed against his mother in fear. I stood holding these papers, feeling something turn over inside me. But strangely, I felt no anger, no pain from betrayal. Instead, a thought flashed through my mind. This is impossible. I looked Svetlana straight in the eye and smiled, quietly, almost sadly. "You see," I began slowly, "my husband could never have had children, but not for the reason you might think." Svetlana froze. "What do you mean?" "I suggest we figure this out calmly," I said, handing the documents back. "Without shouting and scandals, if you're truly interested in the truth." At that moment, the notary emerged from his office, an elderly man with a gray mustache, clearly disturbed by the noise. "What's going on here?" "Family circumstances that require clarification," I answered, surprised by my own calm. "I suggest we postpone the meeting. We need time to sort out the situation." "We're not postponing anything," Svetlana snapped. "I have all the documents." "Documents can be forged," I noted calmly. "They can be bought. But there are things that can't be faked. Genetics, for example. Are you saying Artem isn't Dmitri's son?" Svetlana's voice now trembled not with anger, but with fear. "I'm saying everything is more complicated than it seems," I replied. "And if you truly knew my husband, you should understand he never acted without reason. He always had his reasons." The notary cleared his throat. "I suggest the following. We meet in 3 days. During this time, all parties can gather additional documents and evidence. We'll conduct a paternity test, if necessary." "A test?" Svetlana paled. "But why? I have the certificate." "A certificate is just paper," the notary said sternly. "The truth is more valuable. If the boy is truly the deceased son, this will be confirmed. If not, we'll avoid unnecessary legal proceedings. I nodded. I agree. 3 days is sufficient time. Svetlana looked at me with a strange expression. Fear, confusion, or something else. Fine, she finally forced out. 3 days. She took her son's hand and quickly left the office. The boy turned at the doorway, looking at me with those large dark eyes. They held such melancholy that my heart clenched. When they left, the notary sighed. Mrs. Anderson, I'm very sorry. Such situations are always difficult. It's fine, I answered. The main thing now is to get to the truth. I went outside and caught a taxi. The whole ride home I stared out the window, but saw nothing. Thoughts whirled in my head. Dmitri couldn't have children. But why? And why did I smile when that woman presented her claims? What did I know that she didn't? At home, I went straight to Dmitri's study. Everything remained as it was when he was alive. Books on the shelves. Antique surgical instruments under glass. The desk with its worn leather chair. I sat in that chair, placed my hands on the desktop. The last 5 years, we'd slept in separate rooms. He explained it by his work schedule. Night shifts, middle-of-the-night calls. I didn't object. I needed quiet for my work too. But now I wonder if there was another reason. I began methodically opening desk drawers. Papers, bills, medical journals. Nothing unusual. But when I got to the bottom right drawer, it wouldn't open. Locked. I couldn't find a key anywhere. Then I remembered that Dmitri always carried a set of keys on a separate ring. They'd been given to me with his belongings from the hospital. I found the key ring in the hallway on a shelf. Among the car and work keys was one small one that looked like a furniture key. I returned to the study. The key fit. The drawer opened, and I saw a neat stack of letters tied with a rubber band. Next to it lay a photograph. That same Svetlana with an infant in her arms. On the back, a date from 9 years ago. My heart pounded so loudly I could hear it. I untied the rubber band and took the first letter. Dear Dmitri, thank you for everything you do for us. Artem is already 6 months old. He's a healthy, cheerful boy. Without your help, I wouldn't have managed. I promise no one will ever know the truth. This is our shared secret as you requested. Svetlana. I reread the letter several times. Thank you for everything you do for us. No one will know. The truth. Our shared secret. What secret? If Dmitri truly was this child's father, what secret? Infidelity isn't a secret, it's a fact. But the phrasing was strange. I took the next letter. It was written a year later. Dmitri Igorevich, I'm sending photos of Artem as you requested. He's already 1 year and 3 months starting to walk. The money you transfer helps us live decently. I got a job at a clinic. My mother watches the child. Thank you for agreeing. Without you, Artem would have no future. Thank you for agreeing. Agreeing to what? I quickly looked through the remaining letters. They all maintain the same grateful tone. Svetlana wrote about the child, his accomplishments, sent photographs. Dmitri transferred money regularly. The receipts were also in the drawer. Decent amounts, about $50,000 a month. But nowhere was there a hint of intimacy, of love, of a relationship. Just strange gratitude and some secret. In the last letter, dated 6 months ago, there was a note. Artem often asks about his father. I tell him the truth, that you're a wonderful person who helped us when no one else would. When he turns 18, he'll know everything. That's what we agreed. When he turns 18, he'll know everything. Know what? I set the letters aside and picked up my phone. I needed to talk to someone who knew Dmitri better than I did. His friend and colleague. Andrei Viktorovich worked with Dmitri at the same hospital. They'd been friends since college. If anyone knew my husband's secrets, it was him. I dialed the number. Maria. A surprised voice. How are you holding up? Andrei, I need to talk to you. Urgently. Can you come over? Of course. I'll be there in an hour. I made tea, sat by the window and waited. Questions swarmed in my head. Who was this Svetlana? Why had Dmitri helped her for so many years? And most importantly, what secret connected them? Exactly an hour later, the doorbell rang. Andrei entered and hugged me. How are you, Masha? I'm fine, I lied. Sit down. We need to talk seriously. We sat at the kitchen table. I took out the letters and placed them in front of him. Do you know this woman? Andrei picked up a letter and skimmed it. His face became stone-like. Where did you get this? Found it in Dmitri's study. Today, this Svetlana came to the notary and claimed her son is my husband's child. She presented a birth certificate. Andrei closed his eyes and rubbed the bridge of his nose. My God, you know something, I said. Tell me. I have a right to know the truth. He was silent for a long time, then sighed heavily. Masha, I had no right. Dmitri made me swear. Dmitri is dead, I cut in harshly. And I'm alive, and I have a right to know what was happening in my family. Andrei nodded. All right. 8 years ago, Dmitri was diagnosed with cancer. Testicular cancer. Aggressive form. I froze. The tea in my cup had gone cold, and I hadn't even noticed. They operated on him. Removed one testicle. Then, 6 months later, metastases spread to the second. They had to remove that one too. But I couldn't find words. Why didn't he tell me? He was afraid of losing you, Andrei answered quietly. Afraid you'd leave if you found out he could no longer have children, even though you hadn't planned on them initially. But that's ridiculous, I whispered. I would never. I told him that, but Dmitri was stubborn. He hid the illness, even from colleagues at the hospital. Only I knew because I operated on him myself. I stared at Andrei, trying to process what I'd heard. My husband had hidden a deadly illness from me for 8 years. Lived with that burden alone for 8 years. But there's a nuance, Andrei continued. Before the first surgery, Dmitri deposited samples at a sperm bank. Just in case, he said. In case you ever changed your mind about children. So, theoretically, he could have fathered a child? I asked slowly. Theoretically, yes, through IVF. But as far as I know, he never used it. I picked up the letters and reread one. Then who's the father of this boy? And why did Dmitri help them for so many years? Andrei shook his head. That I don't know. Honestly, Dmitri never told me about Svetlana and her son. We talked a bit more, then Andrei left. I was alone with a pile of questions. I didn't sleep that night. I lay staring at the ceiling, thinking about Dmitri, his secrets, the woman with a child who suddenly appeared after his death. By morning, I'd made a decision. I had to meet with Svetlana. Not at the notary's office, not with witnesses. One-on-one, to find out the whole truth. I found her address in the letters and wrote it down. A residential neighborhood on the city's outskirts. I got in my car and drove. The building where Svetlana lived turned out to be a typical 9-story structure from the 70s. Peeling paint in the entrance and graffitied walls. The smell of dampness. I climbed to the 5th floor, found the right apartment, stood before the door gathering my courage and pressed the bell. The door opened almost immediately. Svetlana stood in the doorway in a bathrobe without makeup. She looked tired and frightened. "You" was all she could get out. "May I come in?" I asked calmly. "We need to talk like human beings." She hesitated, then nodded and stepped back. I entered the small entryway. The apartment was modest, but clean and cozy. Children's drawings on the walls. Toys neatly stacked in a corner. "Artem's at school," Svetlana said, leading me to the kitchen. "We have time." We sat at a small round table. I looked at this woman and tried to understand what had connected her to my husband. "Listen," Svetlana began, nervously fidgeting with the edge of her robe. "I understand how this looks, but I was never your husband's mistress. Never." "Then who are you?" I asked. "And whose child is that really?" Svetlana paled. How do you know? I know a lot, I answered. I know my husband lost the ability to have children 8 years ago. I know he helped you financially all these years, but I don't know why. And I don't know who Artem's real father is. Svetlana covered her face with her hands. Her shoulders shook. I waited, didn't rush her. I'm a nurse, she finally spoke, lowering her hands. 9 years ago, I worked at the hospital where your husband was being treated. We barely interacted. He was just a patient to me. But one day, he found me crying in the staff room. She fell silent, looking out the window. I waited. I was pregnant then, by a married man who promised to divorce his wife, then just disappeared from my life. I was thinking about abortion. I had no money, no one to turn to for help. My parents disowned me when they found out. And Dmitri helped you, I said quietly. Yes, but not the way you think. He offered me a deal. I tensed. What deal? Svetlana stood, walked to the window, spoke without turning around. He said he'd officially recognize my child as his, give him his last name, help financially. But in return, I had to not tell anyone the truth, especially you. But why? I didn't understand. Why would he need that? Svetlana turned to me. Tears glistened in her eyes. Because Artem's real father is his brother. I froze. Blood pounded in my temples so loudly I could barely hear my own voice. Igor. Yes, she nodded. Igor Belayev. The world turned upside down. Igor, Dmitri's brother, successful city official, married, 3 children, exemplary family. Tell me everything, I said, barely controlling the tremor in my voice. From the very beginning. Svetlana sat back down and began to speak. Her story was banal and sad at the same time. 9 years ago, she worked at the same hospital where Dmitri was being treated. Igor came to visit his brother after surgery. They struck up a conversation in the corridor. He invited her for coffee. Then there were meetings, promises, beautiful words. Svetlana fell in love. Igor said he was unhappy in his marriage, that he'd long wanted a divorce. When she found out about the pregnancy and told him, everything changed instantly. Igor became a different person, cold, cruel, said he had a reputation, career, family, that it was her own fault, that he'd promised her nothing, threatened to get her fired, ruin her entire life if she tried to prove anything. I was desperate, Svetlana said, tears streaming down her cheeks. I was 26. I was alone with a child in my womb, no money, no support. My parents cursed me. Friends turned away. I thought about the worst. And then Dmitri appeared. I finished for her. Yes, he somehow found out about my situation. I don't know how. Maybe he overheard my conversation with Igor. Or maybe Igor told him himself, bragging. It doesn't matter. Dmitri Igorevich came to me and said, I'll help you. But there were conditions. She told me about the conditions. Dmitri proposed officially recognizing the child as his, giving him the Belayev name. He'd pay child support, help with education, provide financial support. But Svetlana had to keep the secret until Artem came of age. No one could know who the real father was. Not the Belayev family, not the child's maternal grandparents, and especially not Dmitri's wife. Why did he agree? I asked. Why didn't he force his brother to take responsibility? Svetlana shrugged. He said Igor was dead to him after that act, that he wanted nothing to do with him. But the child wasn't to blame, and he said something strange. What? That after his illness, he couldn't become a father anyway. That at least this way he'd feel like one on paper. I closed my eyes. Pain squeezed my chest so tightly it became hard to breathe. My Dmitri, noble, honest, hiding his wounds from the whole world. He took responsibility for his brother's child to protect an innocent boy and an unfortunate woman. Did you love him? I suddenly asked. Svetlana shook her head. No, I respected him, even idolized him. He saved my life, gave my son a future. But there was never love between us. He'd come a couple times a year, bring gifts for Artem, ask about his progress. He was like a distant, kind uncle. And Artem? Does he know the truth? No. Svetlana wiped away tears. I tell him his dad is very busy with work, that he's a doctor and saves people. That's why he can't see us often. Artem is proud of him, wants to be a doctor like his dad. We sat in silence. Rain fell outside the window. Ordinary New York rain. That Willis said. It's fake, isn't it? Svetlana nodded without raising her eyes. Yes. When Dmitry Igorovich died, I panicked. The money stopped coming, and I needed to raise my son, pay for the apartment, for school, for doctors. I'm a nurse. My salary only covers food. I didn't know what to do, so I took this desperate step. You thought I'd just give you half the inheritance. I hoped for your mercy that you'd understand. Artem is formally Dmitry's son, according to the documents. Doesn't he have a right? I stood, walked to the window, looked at the rain, and thought about Dmitry, who had hidden so much pain, about Igor, who had abandoned a woman with child, about Svetlana, who tried to survive, about the boy who dreamed of becoming a doctor like his dad. Tell me honestly, I turned around. Do you want money or justice? Svetlana raised her tear-stained eyes to me. I want my son to live decently, to have a future, to be able to get an education, to become what he dreams of being. That requires money, yes, but I don't want to rob you, honestly. And Igor? I asked, does he know you came to the notary? No, Svetlana shook her head. I haven't seen him in 9 years. After that conversation, when I told him about the pregnancy, he disappeared from my life. I don't even know his phone number. But I know it, I said, and I think it's time to pay him a visit. Svetlana jumped up in fear. Why? He's your son's father, I interrupted, and he must take responsibility. Not Dmitry, who's dead. Not me, who has nothing to do with it. But him, Igor Belayev. I wrote down her phone number, promised to contact her in a couple days, and left. I sat in the car for about 10 minutes, gathering my thoughts. Then I took out my phone and called Igor. Maria. A surprised voice. How are you holding up? We need to meet, I said coldly. Tonight at your place. And make sure Tatiana is home. Tatiana. He was clearly flustered. My wife? Masha, what happened? I'll be there at 8. You'll see. I hung up. I spent the rest of the day in feverish preparation. Found all of Svetlana's letters, made copies, wrote out the dates of money transfers, called a laboratory where paternity tests could be done, and learned the procedure. Then sat down and made a plan. Igor lived in a prestigious neighborhood in a new luxury building. When I arrived, it was exactly 8 in the evening. I took the elevator up and rang the bell. Igor himself opened the door. He looked like Dmitry, the same dark eyes, the same facial features. But unlike his brother, Igor always looked sleek, self-satisfied, successful. Maria, come in. He tried to appear welcoming, but I could see the tension. I'm not here for small talk, I said, entering. We need to have a serious conversation. In the living room sat Tatiana, Igor's wife, a beautiful woman in her 40s in an expensive dress with perfect hair. We were acquainted, but had never become close friends. Masha, how are you? She stood and hugged me. This is such a tragedy. Dmitry was such a wonderful person. He was, I agreed, taking a folder of documents from my bag. That's exactly why I'm here. We need to discuss something important. Igor paled. Maybe Tatiana should leave if this is family. No, I cut him off. This concerns all of us, especially your wife. Sit down, both of you. They exchanged glances, but sat. I remained standing. 9 years ago, when Dmitry was being treated for cancer, you had an affair with a nurse. Her name was Svetlana. She got pregnant. You abandoned her and threatened her if she tried to prove anything. Tatiana cried out. Igor jumped up. That's a lie. Sit down, I said coldly. I'm not finished. Dmitri found out about this and decided to help that woman. He officially recognized the child as his, gave him the Belayev name, helped financially all these years, covered your despicable act with his nobility. I laid the letters on the table, copies of the birth certificate, transfer receipts. You have a son, Igor. He's 8 years old. His name is Artem. Formally, he's listed as Dmitri's son, but in reality, he's your child. Tatiana stared at her husband with wide eyes. Her face had gone white. Is this true? She whispered. Igor was silent. His jaw worked furiously. Answer. Tatiana shouted. Is this true? It was a long time ago, he mumbled. A fleeting connection. It meant nothing. But the child means something, I said. And now that Dmitri's gone, someone has to take responsibility for this boy. And that someone is you. I'm not obligated. Igor snapped. I have my own family. I don't owe anyone anything. By law, you do, I countered. We can do a paternity test. And when it confirms Artem is your son, the court will make you pay child support. But that's not all. I looked at both of them. Dmitri left a substantial estate, an apartment, a country house, bank accounts. Formally, Artem is his son and has a right to a share of this inheritance. But I know the truth, and I can either go to court, prove forgery, spend years in litigation, or we can resolve this like human beings. Like human beings? Tatiana looked at me hopefully. How? I don't want the child to suffer, I said. Artem isn't to blame for anything. He grew up thinking Dmitri was his father, dreams of becoming a doctor like him. And Dmitri would want the boy to have a future. I took out papers I'd prepared in advance. Here's my plan. I'm creating a charitable foundation in Dmitri Belayev's name. The foundation will help single mothers from among medical workers. I'm putting $50 million from Dmitri's estate into it. Tatiana gasped. Igor stared at the floor. Svetlana will become the foundation's manager with a salary. Artem will receive paid education through university. But there are conditions. I looked at Igor. You officially recognize Artem as your son. Do a paternity test for legal clarity. Pay $25 million into the foundation as compensation for the years Dmitri paid for you. And pay child support until Artem comes of age. This is blackmail, Igor croaked. This is justice, I cut him off. You have a choice. Either you agree to these conditions, or I go to court. And to the media, imagine the headlines. High-ranking official abandoned pregnant mistress, and his brother took responsibility. What do you think will happen to your career? Tatiana put her hand on her husband's shoulder. Igor, you have a son, she said quietly. Your son. You must. Shut up, he snarled, but his voice held not anger but desperation. I gathered the papers. I'm giving you 2 days to think. If I don't hear from you in 2 days, I go to court. And to the newspapers. I left the apartment in heavy silence. In the elevator, I finally let myself exhale. My hands trembled, my heart pounded, but I'd done what I had to do. For Dmitri, for justice, for a little boy who dreamed of becoming a doctor. 2 days passed in agonizing waiting. I continued sorting through Dmitri's things, preparing documents for the foundation, meeting with lawyers. I didn't tell Svetlana anything, deciding to wait for Igor's answer. On the 3rd day, toward evening, the phone rang. Unknown number. Hello. Maria Anderson? This is Tatiana Belayev. Can we meet? Just the 2 of us without Igor. I agreed. We met at a cafe near downtown. Tatiana arrived without makeup in a simple sweater and jeans. She looked tired and aged. Thank you for coming, she said when we sat at a table. I had to talk to you. I'm listening. Tatiana was silent, gathering her thoughts. These 2 days have been hell. Igor barely slept or ate. We talked a lot. For the first time in all our years of marriage, We talked for real. And what did you come to? He agrees to your conditions, Tatiana exhaled. He'll recognize the boy, pay into the foundation, pay child support. Everything you said. I nodded, feeling not relief, but a kind of emptiness. That's the right decision. You know, Tatiana wrapped her hands around her coffee cup. When you left, I couldn't calm down for a long time. I screamed at Igor, cried, wanted to file for divorce. But then I thought about that boy, about Artem. She raised her eyes to me. He has no father, no real father. The one he thought was his dad died. And Igor? Igor's never even seen him. And I thought maybe this is a chance for Igor to correct his mistake, a chance for the boy to find a father. You want Igor to be involved in Artem's life. I was surprised. I don't know, Tatiana admitted honestly. I haven't forgiven my husband yet, and I don't know if I ever will. But the child shouldn't suffer because of adults. My children, there are 3 of them, will learn they have another brother, and I don't want them to be ashamed of that. For the first time in days, I felt warmth toward someone. You're right, I said. Children aren't to blame for their parents' mistakes. Tell me about him, Tatiana requested. About Artem. What's he like? I told her the little I knew, about how he dreamed of becoming a doctor, about his large dark eyes, about how he was proud of his dad, Dmitri. Does he look like your husband? Tatiana asked. Like Dmitri? No, but he looks like Igor. Same eyes, same shape of lips. Tatiana nodded. I'm scared, she admitted. Scared to meet him, this boy who turned our life upside down. He didn't turn your life upside down, I said gently. Igor did that 9 years ago. Artem just exists. We talked more, exchanged phone numbers. Tatiana left, and I sat in the cafe, looking out the window at the passing people. Each lived their own life. Each carried their own burden of problems and secrets. The next day, I met with a lawyer. We drew up documents for creating the foundation, spelled out all conditions. The lawyer approved the plan. Everything was legally sound. The only thing, he said, is we'll need to do a paternity test to exclude possible claims in the future. If the boy is really Igor Belayev's son, then formally he has no rights to your husband's estate, even if he's listed as his son in documents. I understand, I nodded. We'll arrange the test. That evening, I called Svetlana. We need to meet. I have news. Bad news? She asked fearfully. Depends on how you look at it. Come to my place tomorrow at 2 with Artem. Svetlana arrived exactly at 2. The boy held his mother's hand, looking at me warily. I smiled at him. Hi, Artem. My name is Maria. I was married to Dmitri Igorovich. To my dad, he asked quietly. My heart clenched. Yes, I answered. Please come in. We sat in the living room. Artem looked around curiously at the room. The books on shelves, the photographs on the walls. Is that Dad? He pointed to a large photograph of Dmitri on the wall. Yes, that's him. He was a real hero, Artem said with childlike seriousness. Mom says he saved people. I want to be a doctor too, and save people. I looked at Svetlana. She sat pale, wringing her hands. Artem, I said gently, could you look at the books for a while? They're on that shelf. There's an encyclopedia about medicine with pictures. The boy happily ran to the books. When he moved away, I turned to Svetlana. I met with Igor and his wife. Svetlana paled even more. Igor agreed to recognize Artem, pay compensation into the foundation, and pay child support. But we need to do a paternity test. A test? She was confused. Why? I'm telling the truth. For legal clarity, I explained. So there are no questions in the future. It's a simple procedure, a swab from the mouth. Artem won't even understand what's happening. Svetlana nodded. All right. When? Day after tomorrow. I made an appointment at a lab. Igor will come too. I don't want to see him, Svetlana said quietly. I understand, but it's necessary. We talked more about the foundation, how it would work. Svetlana listened with disbelief. Why are you doing this? She finally asked. Why are you helping us? I tried to sue you with fake papers. I looked at Artem, who was enthusiastically leafing through the encyclopedia, because Dmitri would have wanted this. He helped you for 9 years, which means he thought it was right, and I want to be worthy of his memory. Svetlana cried, quietly, covering her face with her hands. I don't deserve such treatment. Artem deserves it, I said. He deserves a normal life, education, a future. 2 days later, we all gathered at the medical laboratory. Me, Svetlana with Artem, Igor. Tatiana didn't come. She said she wasn't ready yet. Igor looked terrible, gaunt, with dark circles under his eyes. When he saw Artem, he froze, stood and stared at the boy who was his spitting image as a child. Hello, he said uncertainly. Artem hid behind his mother. Svetlana was silent, staring at the floor. Hello, Artem. Igor crouched down to be at the child's eye level. My name is Igor. I'm Dmitri Igorevitch's brother. My dad's uncle, the boy asked. Yes, Igor nodded. His voice trembled. Your dad's. The sample collection procedure went quickly. Artem didn't even understand what was happening. Thought it was a regular medical checkup. When it was over, we left the lab. Results in a week, I said. Then we'll process all the papers. Igor stood, not daring to leave. He looked at Artem. Can I see him sometimes? He suddenly asked. Svetlana flinched. I looked at her questioningly. She hesitated, then slowly nodded. It's not for me to decide, I said. It's for the child's mother to decide. Svetlana looked at Igor. In her gaze was so much pain, so much resentment. Why now? She asked quietly. Why not 9 years ago when I cried and begged for help? Igor lowered his head. I was a coward. I only thought about myself, my career, my reputation. I didn't think about you, didn't think about the child. And that's the biggest mistake of my life. You abandoned me. Svetlana's voice trembled. Threatened to destroy me. If not for your brother, I would have. She didn't finish. Igor nodded. I know. Dmitri told me when I accidentally found out he was helping you. We fought then. He said I was dead to him, that a real man answers for his actions, that I was a coward and a scoundrel. And he was right. He was right, I said coldly. Igor looked at me. He was right, but I want to make amends. Not for myself, for Artem. He's my son, my blood, and I want to be part of his life. Svetlana was silent. Artem tugged at her hand. Mom, why is the uncle so sad? Adults have their problems, sweetheart, she answered. We parted ways. Igor drove off in his car. Svetlana, Artem, and I caught a taxi. What do you think I should do? Svetlana asked in the car when Artem dozed off on her shoulder. Allow visits. I don't know, I answered honestly. That's your decision. But, you know, Dmitri always said people deserve a second chance if they sincerely repent. Do you think Igor is sincere? I think he's frightened, I said. Frightened that his secret was revealed, that he might lose his family and career. But you saw how he looked at Artem. In that gaze was not just fear. There was something else. What? Recognition, I answered. He saw himself in that boy, his continuation. And maybe for the first time in 9 years, he felt responsibility. We waited a week for the test results. During that time, I continued processing documents for the foundation, met with lawyers, looked for office space. Svetlana helped. It turned out she had organizational abilities. We began communicating more often. She told me about her life, how hard it was to raise a child alone, how she rejoiced at each transfer from Dmitri, how she feared it would all end. You know, she said once when we sat in a cafe discussing foundation plans, I always envied you. Me? Yes. You were married to such a wonderful man, lived with him, saw him every day. and I only got letters and money. Like handouts. That wasn't a handout, I objected. Dmitri helped you because he wanted to, because he thought it was right. Did you love him? Svetlana suddenly asked. The question caught me off guard. Did I love Dmitri? Of course I loved him, but with what kind of love? I loved him, I answered after a pause, but probably not the way I should have. We were both too busy with our own affairs. Me with furniture, him with medicine. The last years we were more like roommates than spouses, and only now do I understand how much I lost. Svetlana nodded. And I lost 9 years waiting. Waited for someone to come along. But with a child in my arms and a reputation as a single mother, it was impossible. Now everything will be different, I said. You'll have stability, work, prospects. You can build a life. The test results came on the 10th day. As expected, they confirmed that Igor Belayev was Artem Dmitrievich's biological father with 99.9% probability. I called all interested parties and set up a meeting at the notary's office to process all documents. On the day of the meeting, everyone gathered, me, Svetlana, Igor, his wife Tatiana, lawyers from both sides, and the notary. Artem stayed with a nanny. We decided the child didn't need to be present for legal proceedings. The notary read the documents. Igor Belayev officially recognized Artem as his son. He was obligated to pay $25 million to the Dmitri Belayev Charitable Foundation within 3 months. He was obligated to pay child support for Artem's maintenance until he came of age in the amount of $50,000 monthly. Do you agree to the terms? The notary asked. I agree, Igor answered hollowly. The documents were signed. Everything was legally formalized. Artem Dmitrievich Belayev got a second official father, Igor Igorevich Belayev. The foundation received funding. Svetlana got the position of manager with a salary of $200,000 a year. When everyone left, only Tatiana remained. She came up to me. Thank you, she said, for not taking revenge, for not destroying our family. I didn't want revenge, I answered. I wanted justice, and I wanted Dmitri to be proud of me. If he could see this, he would be proud, Tatiana nodded. You acted nobly. She left. I sat alone in the empty notary's office, sat on the chair, closed my eyes. It's over. Now a new life begins for all of us. 3 months passed. The Dmitri Belayev Foundation began operating. Svetlana and I rented a small office, hired an accountant and lawyer, launched a website. Applications from single mothers among medical workers began coming in a week after opening. I came to the office every day. Working on the foundation became my salvation. When you're sorting through other people's problems, helping people, there's no time for your own pain. And there was pain. At night, when I was alone in the big empty apartment, such loneliness would wash over me that I wanted to scream. I missed Dmitri. But not the Dmitri I'd lived with in recent years, the one he'd been at the beginning of our acquaintance. In love, open, alive, Svetlana blossomed before my eyes. She had stable work, a good salary, prospects. She got a new hairdo, started taking care of herself. Even came to the office, not in worn jeans, but in decent business suits. Maria, she said once when we sat after work drinking tea, can I ask you something? Something personal. Ask. Igor Igorevich. He calls me every week, asking permission to see Artem. I haven't allowed it yet, but he's persistent. I nodded. I knew about this. Igor had called me too, asking how to influence Svetlana. And what do you feel? Svetlana was silent. I don't know. On one hand, he abandoned me 9 years ago, renounced the child. On the other, he recognized Artem, pays, wants to be involved in his life. Maybe he really has changed. And Artem? I asked, how does he feel about having 2 fathers? He doesn't fully understand yet, Svetlana sighed. He thinks Igor Igorevich is just an uncle, his dad Dmitri's brother. I don't know how to tell him the truth, and whether I should at all. Sooner or later you'll have to, I said. But that's for you to decide. You're the mother. You know best. A week later, Svetlana finally allowed Igor to meet with Artem. The meeting was scheduled at a park on Saturday afternoon. Svetlana asked me to go with them, said it would make her feel calmer. We arrived at the park early. Artem ran between trees, enjoying the warm autumn day. Igor appeared exactly at 3 o'clock. He carried a large bag of gifts. "Hello," he greeted us. "Hello," Svetlana answered coldly. Artem ran up to us, saw Igor, recognized him. "Oh, uncle," the boy smiled. "Hello." "Hi, Artem." Igor crouched down, held out the bag. "I brought you gifts." The boy looked curiously into the bag. There were toys, books, a construction set. "Wow. Thank you," he rejoiced. We sat on a bench. Artem enthusiastically examined the gifts. Igor watched him with such longing that I felt sorry for him. "Artem," he began cautiously, "do you like soccer?" "Yes," the boy nodded, "but I'm not very good at playing." "Want me to teach you? We can come here on Saturdays, and I'll teach you to play." Artem looked at his mother questioningly. "Can I, Mom?" Svetlana hesitated. I quietly said to her, "Give him a chance. See how it goes." She nodded. "You can, but only on Saturdays and only at the park. And I'll be nearby." Igor looked at her gratefully. "Thank you." They spent 2 hours at the park. Igor really did teach Artem to play soccer. The boy ran happily, trying to score a goal at improvised goalposts. Igor encouraged him, showed him how to kick the ball properly. Svetlana and I sat on the bench and watched. "He's good with kids," I noted. "He has 3 of his own children," Svetlana said dryly. "He has experience." "Are you still angry at him?" "Wouldn't you be?" She looked at me. He abandoned me pregnant, threatened me, and now he wants to play good daddy. "People change," I said. "Not always, not everything, but they change." "Are you defending him?" Svetlana was surprised. "No," I shook my head. "I'm just thinking that Artem deserves a father, a real, living father, not the memory of Dmitri, whom he barely knew, but a person who'll be nearby." Svetlana was silent. "I'm afraid," she admitted. "Afraid Igor will enter Artem's life, then disappear again, and then the boy will suffer. Better to have no father at all than a father who appears and disappears." I understood her fear. It was justified. After that meeting, Igor started coming every Saturday. At first, they just played soccer. Then he began taking Artem to museums, theater, movies. Svetlana was always nearby, but gradually began loosening control. And then something happened that no one expected. Artem caught a cold. A simple cold turned into pneumonia. He was hospitalized. Svetlana called me in a panic. "Maria, Artem has a high fever. The doctors say it's serious." "Where are you?" "At St. Luke's Hospital, pulmonology department." "I'm on my way." I arrived in half an hour. Svetlana sat in the corridor, pale, eyes red from tears. Next to her sat Igor. He was holding her hand. "How is he?" I asked. "Bad," Svetlana whispered. "Temperature near 104 won't go down. Doctors say if the antibiotic doesn't help, they'll have to transfer him to ICU." I sat down next to them. Igor looked no better than Svetlana. Eyes red, hand shaking. "I called in the best specialists," he said. "They'll hold a consultation tomorrow morning." "Thank you," was all Svetlana could get out. We sat there all night, the 3 of us. Svetlana periodically went in to see Artem, then returned and cried. Igor tried to calm her. I held her hand. By morning, the temperature began to drop. The antibiotic had worked. Artem was improving. When the doctors said the danger had passed, Svetlana cried from relief. Igor hugged her. She didn't push him away. She stood and cried on his shoulder, and he stroked her head and repeated, "It's okay. Everything will be okay." I stepped aside, giving them time alone. I looked out the window at the dawn and thought about how strangely human destinies intertwine. A week later, Artem was discharged. Igor came to pick them up in his car, helped carry things to the apartment. When Artem went to sleep, the three of us, Igor, Svetlana, and I, sat in the kitchen drinking tea. "Thank you both," Svetlana said. "I don't know what I would have done alone." "You're not alone," Igor answered. "And you won't be. I want to be part of Artem's life. And yours too, if you'll allow it." Svetlana looked at him with a long gaze. "I need time. I can't just take and forgive 9 years." "I understand," Igor nodded. "I'm ready to wait as long as it takes." I left, leaving them alone. I felt that something was changing between them. The shared trouble had brought them closer. At the foundation, things were going well. In 3 months, we'd helped 20 single mothers already. Some with money for children's treatment, some with housing payments, some with education. The stories were different, but they were all stories of women fighting for their children alone. Working with them, I increasingly understood Svetlana. Understood how hard it had been for her 9 years ago, how scared, and how grateful she was to Dmitri for his help. One day, Andrei Viktorovich, Dmitri's friend, came to the office. "Masha, can I talk to you for a minute?" "Of course, come in." We sat in my office. Andrei looked agitated. "I wanted to tell you you're doing great. What you've done, creating this foundation, helping Svetlana and her son, making Igor take responsibility. It's right. Dmitri would be proud of you." My eyes stung. "I'm just doing what I think is right." "You know," Andrei said, "Dmitri hid a lot from you. The illness, helping Svetlana, the conflict with his brother. But he didn't do it from lack of trust. He was just afraid of seeming weak. Afraid you'd see him not as he wanted to be." "That's foolish," I whispered. "I loved him not for strength, but just for being him." "But he didn't understand that," Andrei sighed. "Men generally rarely understand that. We think we have to be strong, successful, perfect. And when it doesn't work out, we start hiding our weaknesses." I nodded. How many years Dmitri and I lived under one roof, but never learned to be truly close. Each lived in their own world. Me in the world of antique furniture restoration. Him in the world of medicine and secrets. "You know," I said, "sometimes I think if Dmitri hadn't died, we would have just continued living like that. Parallel, next to each other, but not together. And only his death made me see what he really was." "And what was he?" "Noble, lonely, kind, and very, very unhappy." I wiped away tears. He helped people his whole life, operated, saved, treated. And when he got sick himself, he didn't tell anyone. Carried that pain inside. And even after death, he took care of someone else's child whom he'd taken under his protection. "But now, thanks to you, his kindness continues," Andrei said. "The foundation in his name helps people. Artem got a chance at a normal life. Igor is learning to be a father. Svetlana found work and stability. All this is thanks to you." "Thanks to Dmitri," I corrected. "I'm just finishing what he started." Andrei left. I sat in the office, looking at Dmitri's photograph on the wall. I'd hung it there on the first day the foundation opened, so he'd be with us. That evening Tatiana called me. "Maria, can we meet? I need to talk." We met at the same cafe where we'd been the first time. Tatiana looked tired. "How are things?" I asked. "Strange," she answered honestly. "Igor has changed, become different. Every Saturday he goes to see Artem, calls him every evening, tells our children about him. They know, by the way, that they have another brother." "And how did they take it?" "Differently," Tatiana sighed. "Our oldest daughter is angry at her father. Our middle son is indifferent. He's only 5. He doesn't understand much. Our youngest daughter is 3. She doesn't understand anything at all." "And you? How are you?" Tatiana was silent. "I'm trying to forgive. It's hard. Every time he goes to see Artem, I feel jealousy, anger, resentment. But then he comes back, tells me about the boy, and I see he's happy. For the first time in many years, truly happy." So you won't divorce? I don't know, she admitted. We're seeing a family therapist, trying to fix the relationship. But whether it'll work out, I don't know. I hope it works out, I said. For the children's sake. All the children. Tatiana nodded. You know, Maria, I wanted to thank you for not completely destroying our family. You could have gone to the media, made a scandal, but you acted with dignity. I didn't want revenge, I repeated. I wanted justice, and for everyone to get a second chance. We talked more and parted. I rode home, thinking about how everything had changed in these months. Svetlana had started a new life. Igor was learning to be a father. Tatiana was trying to save her family. Artem got a future. And I continued living in an empty apartment with the ghost of the past. I worked at the foundation, helped people. But my personal life had frozen. I couldn't let go of Dmitri, couldn't move forward. That night, I dreamed of him. We were young, just met, standing at that auction where we first encountered each other. He smiled at me and said, "Live, Masha. Just live." I woke up in tears and for the first time in months understood that he was right. I needed to live, not cling to the past, but live in the present. A year passed since Dmitri's death. A year that changed everything and everyone. The Dmitri Belayev Foundation had helped more than 150 single mothers from among medical workers. We expanded, hired 2 more staff members, opened a hotline for consultations. Local newspapers began writing about us. Other cities started showing interest in our experience. Svetlana had completely transformed. From an exhausted, frightened woman, she'd become a confident professional. She ran all foundation affairs with such dedication that I sometimes wondered where she got so much energy. We became friends, real friends. Sometimes in the evenings she'd come to my place. We'd drink wine and talk about everything, about life, men, children, dreams. You know, she said once, I met someone. I smiled. And who is he? Andrei Petrovich, our lawyer at the foundation. We had coffee a few times after work. He invited me to the theater. And you agreed? Yes. She blushed. It's strange. I was alone for so long. It's wonderful, I said sincerely. You deserve happiness. And you, she asked. You have a right to a personal life, too. A year has passed, Maria. Dmitri wouldn't want you to stay alone. I was silent. I knew she was right, but I couldn't step over something inside myself. I'm not ready yet, I admitted. Svetlana didn't insist. A week later, something happened that shocked everyone. Igor and Tatiana decided to officially divorce. Tatiana called me herself. We tried, she said tiredly. A whole year we tried to glue the pieces together. Went to a therapist, talked, tried to understand each other. But it didn't work out. Too much pain, too many resentments. I'm very sorry, I answered. You know what's strangest? Tatiana continued. I'm not angry at him anymore. I just realized we're different people. That I want one thing, he wants another. And together we're not on the same path. How are the children coping? We agreed on joint custody. Igor will see them on weekends. And Artem too. After the divorce, Igor started coming to Svetlana's more often. Not just on Saturdays, but on weekdays. He helped with Artem. Took him to activities, did homework with him. Artem got used to him. Stopped calling him uncle. Started calling him simply Igor. And once, when we all sat together in a cafe, me, Svetlana, Igor, and Artem, the boy asked, Mom, why does Igor come to our place so often? Svetlana and Igor exchanged glances. The moment they both feared had arrived. Artem, Svetlana began cautiously. Remember we talked about your dad? About Dmitri Igorovich. Yes, the boy nodded. He was a doctor, saved people, then died in an accident. Right. He was a wonderful person, and he cared about us very much. But he wasn't your dad. By blood. Artem frowned. I don't understand. Igor intervened. Artem, I'm your real dad. By blood. And Dmitri Igorovich was my brother. And when you were born, he decided to help us all. Took you under his protection, gave you his last name." The boy was silent, digesting what he'd heard. Then he looked at Igor. "So you're my dad?" "Yes," Igor nodded. His voice trembled. "I'm your dad. I'm sorry I wasn't there before. I made a big mistake. But now I want to make everything right." Artem thought, "Can I call you Dad and Dmitry Igorevich Dad too? Only he's in heaven now." Tears welled up in Svetlana's eyes. Igor nodded, unable to speak. "Of course you can, son. Of course." I sat and watched the scene. A family, not a simple one, with a complicated history, but a family. They'd found their way to each other. 2 months later, Svetlana and Igor announced they'd be living together. Not marrying yet, too soon after his divorce, but they'd tried building a relationship. Some people condemned them. How could this woman forgive the man who'd abandoned her pregnant? But I understood. Svetlana forgave not for his sake, for her son's sake, who needed a father, and for her own sake, because she was tired of living in the past. And I still lived in the past. I worked at the foundation, helped people. But in the evenings I returned to an empty apartment and talked to Dmitry's photograph. One day Andrei Viktorovich invited me to an exhibition of antique medical instruments. He knew this had been a shared passion of mine and Dmitry's. "There'll be unique exhibits," he said. "19th-century instruments from private collections. Dmitry would definitely want to see this." I agreed. The exhibition was at the Medical History Museum. I walked through the halls, examining exhibits, and suddenly saw a familiar set of surgical instruments in a leather case. This set belonged to the famous New York surgeon Ivan Romanoff, the tour guide explained to a group of visitors. It dates to 1880, was sold at auction 13 years ago, and has now been donated to the museum by the collector's widow. I froze. This was that very set Dmitry had bought at the auction where we met. I donated it to the museum 2 months ago along with his entire collection. I couldn't keep it at home. Every item reminded me of him. I stood looking at these instruments, remembering that day. A young, handsome man in an expensive suit who eagerly bid for the antique set. I was restoring an antique table for the same auction. We struck up a conversation after the bidding. He invited me for coffee. That's how it all began. "Beautiful work, isn't it?" a voice said nearby. I turned. Next to me stood a man about 40 in glasses with a pleasant face. He was also examining the instrument set. "Yes," I nodded. "Very beautiful." "Do you know about antiques?" he asked. "A bit. I'm a restorer." "Really? How interesting." He smiled. "And I'm a doctor, a surgeon. These instruments are part of our profession's history." We got to talking. He turned out to be Dmitry's colleague, though they'd worked at different hospitals and weren't personally acquainted. His name was Michael. After the exhibition, we happened to leave together. He suggested coffee. I wanted to refuse, but suddenly agreed. We sat in the cafe, talked about work, medicine, restoration. He told funny stories from his medical practice. I caught myself smiling. The first time in a year I was truly smiling. "Forgive the indiscreet question," he said, "but are you married?" "Widowed," I answered. "My husband died a year ago." "I'm very sorry," Michael said sincerely. "Thank you. And you?" "Divorced 3 years now. No children. Work took all my time. It didn't work out." We exchanged phone numbers. He said if I wanted to go to another exhibition or just talk, I should call. I came home and sat by the window for a long time. Thought about Dmitry, the past year, how my life had changed. About Svetlana, who'd found the strength to forgive and start over. About Igor, who was learning to be a father. About Artem, who now had a future. And what did I have? The foundation, work, helping others. That's important, but it's not everything needed for life. I walked to Dmitry's photograph on the shelf. "Forgive me," I said aloud. "Forgive that I wasn't closer to you, that we lost each other living under one roof, that I didn't know about your pain, your secrets. But you showed me what it means to be a real person, to help without expecting thanks, to protect the weak, to take responsibility for those nearby. Tears flowed down my cheeks, but I continued. Thank you for these 12 years, for all the good we had. You were a noble person, Dimitri, a real one, and I'll be worthy of your memory. I'll help people through the foundation. I'll live so you'd be proud. I fell silent, then added quietly, and I'll live on, because you'd want that, right? Of course, there was no answer, but in the apartment's silence, it seemed I heard his voice. Live, Masha. Just live. A week later, I called Michael. We met again, then again. Gradually, slowly, carefully, something began to emerge between us. Not love yet, too soon for love, but sympathy, warmth, interest. I told him about Dimitri, about the foundation, about this whole tangled story with Igor and Svetlana. Michael listened attentively, didn't judge, didn't give advice, just was there. And at the foundation, a significant event occurred. A woman named Olga contacted us, a nurse, single mother, raising a daughter with cerebral palsy. She didn't have enough money for the child's rehabilitation. We helped, paid for a course of treatment, bought necessary equipment. 6 months later, the girl started walking with support. For the first time in her life, Olga came to the office with tears of gratitude. You saved my daughter, she said. I don't know how to thank you. Thank Dmitry Belayev, I answered, pointing to his photograph on the wall. This is his kindness continuing to live. Olga looked at the photograph. He was a wonderful person, judging by what you created in his memory. He was, I agreed, the most wonderful. That evening I sat in the office alone. Svetlana had already left. Artem had a birthday. They were celebrating as a family, Igor, Svetlana, Artem, and even Igor's children from his first marriage. A real big family. I looked at the folders with cases, at the list of those we'd helped. 173 families in a year. 173 stories we'd changed for the better. My phone rang. Michael. Hi. How are things? Good, I answered. Just thinking about life. About what specifically? About how sometimes you need to go through loss to find your true self. To understand what's really important. To learn to be grateful for each day. Wise thoughts, he said. Listen, I was thinking. Don't you want to go out of town this weekend? Just to breathe fresh air, rest from the hustle. I smiled. I do. Very much. When I finished the conversation, I walked to Dimitri's photograph. See, I told him, I'm learning to live on. This isn't betrayal of your memory. This is continuation of life. The life you saved with your nobility. I turned off the light in the office and went outside. It was a warm spring evening. The city lived its life. People hurried about their business, laughed, talked. Life continued, and I was part of that life. Not a wife frozen in the past, not a widow mourning her loss, but a living person who has work, friends, a future. Dimitri taught me the main thing. Not he who conceived is the father, but he who raised. Not the family by blood, but by deeds. And true love isn't in loud words, but in quiet actions. He helped people his whole life, operated on them, treated them, saved them. And in the end, he took someone else's child under his protection, gave him his name and his future. Thanks to him, Artem grew up in love and care. Thanks to him, Svetlana didn't perish. Thanks to him, even Igor got a chance to make amends. And now, thanks to me, his kindness multiplied. The foundation in his name helped hundreds of people and would continue helping. This was my way of saying thank you. Thank you for those 12 years, for lessons in nobility, for showing me what a real person should be. I walked through the evening city, and for the first time in a year, felt lightness. The past was behind me. Ahead was the future, unknown but full of possibilities. Dmitri was gone, but his light continued to shine. In the foundation that bore his name. In Artem, who dreamed of becoming a doctor like Dad Dmitri. In Svetlana, who found the strength to start over. in Igor, who learned to be a father, and in me, who learned not just to live, but to live with dignity. This is the real inheritance. Not money, not apartments, not bank accounts, but actions that change people's lives. Kindness that continues to live even after death. And I was grateful to fate for meeting Dmitri, for those 12 years next to him, for all of it, the joy and the pain, because all of it made me who I became. Strong, capable of helping, capable of forgiving, capable of loving. Life continued, and that was right.